This is not a channel for comfort or easy escapes. This is where lies are exposed, power is tested, and every decision carries a price. We dig into stories where trust becomes a weapon, loyalty turns toxic, and the people you least suspect are capable of the darkest acts. If you're here for polished illusions, you won't last long. But if you're ready to watch secrets unravel and witness how far people will go to protect themselves, then step inside, because once the truth starts moving, there's no turning back. Bill's anger had been fermenting long before he named it. It lived beneath his discipline, beneath the careful patience he showed the world, growing sharper each time he replayed the chain of events that led him here. What enraged him most was not only the crime itself, but the elegance with which it had been hidden. Hayley had not relied on chaos or impulse. She had relied on trust, and Bill had been one of the people who offered it. The plan to bring Lynette back was not conceived in a moment of bravery. It was born out of exhaustion. Bill was tired of carrying fragments of a truth too heavy to hold alone, tired of watching Hayley move freely, her image intact, her authority unchallenged. Every day he delayed action felt like a quiet betrayal of his own moral limits. Yet the closer he came to exposing her, the more he understood what it would cost. Justice would not arrive cleanly. It would arrive dragging collateral damage behind it. Lynette was the key because she was the fracture Hayley had never fully sealed. Bill knew this, and he hated himself for it. He was not inviting Lynette back out of loyalty or redemption. He was placing her in the path of a storm she had already survived once. The decision clawed at him, forcing him to confront the uncomfortable truth that his sense of righteousness was entangled with self-preservation. Lynette carried proof, memory, and context that could not be erased. She also carried scars that Bill was reopening by design. As preparations moved forward, Bill's internal conflict sharpened. He justified each step as necessary, reminding himself that inaction would guarantee more blood on invisible hands. Still, doubt surfaced in quiet moments. He questioned whether exposing Hayley would actually stop her, or simply push her toward a more desperate and unpredictable edge. The thought that his plan might accelerate violence rather than prevent it became a constant pressure in his chest.
Hayley, meanwhile, sensed the shift long before she could identify its source. Her control had always depended on anticipation, on reading the room before anyone else realized it was changing. The reemergence of old patterns, subtle disruptions in routine, and the return of unresolved history triggered something volatile inside her. Fear, long suppressed beneath ambition and calculation, resurfaced as fury. She had not built her life through caution. She had built it through decisive elimination of obstacles, and now one of those obstacles was moving again. Her anger was not explosive, it was surgical. She reviewed her past decisions not with regret, but with irritation at the possibility that one imperfection might undo years of precision. Lynette represented more than evidence. She represented the moment Hayley had underestimated the persistence of consequence. The idea that Bill was orchestrating this confrontation felt like a personal affront, a betrayal that redefined him from asset to liability. Bill's preparations intensified, each step narrowing the margin for error. He began to understand that once Lynette crossed the threshold back into this world, there would be no retreat. Exposure would provoke retaliation. Hayley would not wait for proof to surface. She would act on suspicion alone. That knowledge fueled Bill's urgency, but also magnified his guilt. He was gambling with lives, including his own, under the banner of moral necessity. Lynette's return was never meant to be public, yet secrecy itself became a risk. The act of hiding her presence demanded cooperation from people with shifting loyalties, some of whom had already been compromised by fear or greed. Every additional person who knew increased the likelihood of leakage. Bill found himself making ruthless calculations, cutting off access, manipulating schedules, and isolating information. Each decision pushed him further from the man he believed himself to be. For Lynette, being pulled back into this reality reignited a rage she had worked hard to bury. Her anger was layered, at Hayley for what had been done, at Bill for choosing the timing, and at herself for still being connected to any of it. She understood the danger immediately. She also understood why Bill needed her. That clarity did not soften the resentment, it sharpened it. Being essential did not feel like power, it felt like captivity. As pressure mounted, Bill recognized the most dangerous aspect of his plan was not Hayley's reaction, but his own willingness to proceed despite mounting warning signs. He was no longer simply exposing a crime. He was testing the limits of how much destruction he was willing to accept in the name of stopping it. The line between justice and vengeance blurred with every sleepless night. Hayley's countermeasures unfolded quietly. She began to dismantle potential threats before they could solidify, isolating Bill socially and professionally, framing his behavior as instability rather than strategy. This tactic infuriated him more than open confrontation ever could. She was rewriting the narrative in real time, turning his urgency into recklessness in the eyes of others. The sense of being trapped inside her version of reality pushed Bill toward increasingly aggressive decisions. As the final pieces moved into place, all three found themselves cornered by their own choices. Bill was driven by a mixture of responsibility and rage, unable to step back without admitting complicity. Lynette was forced to relive trauma in exchange for the possibility of preventing future violence, even as she questioned whether exposure would truly bring closure. Hayley, feeling her control erode, grew more volatile, her past calculation giving way to the dangerous certainty that survival justified any act. The plan reached its breaking point not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. Evidence aligned, timelines converged, the truth stood ready to surface. Yet with that clarity came the realization that revelation would not restore balance, it would detonate it. Bill understood with cold precision that once Hayley was exposed, the aftermath would be uncontrollable. Power structures would collapse, alliances would fracture, and those closest to the truth would be the first to suffer its consequences. In the end, none of them were pursuing justice alone. They were pursuing release, from fear, from guilt, from the weight of secrets that had shaped every decision they made. Being pushed to the edge did not purify their intentions, it revealed them. And as the walls closed in, each negative impulse, anger, suspicion, resentment, became a survival mechanism rather than a flaw. What remained was inevitability. The plan could no longer be stopped, only endured. And when the truth finally emerged, it would not choose sides. It would simply destroy whatever stood too close, proving that some revelations, once unleashed, leave no one untouched. And as everything settles into an uneasy silence, what remains is not victory, but exposure. The truth, once unearthed, refuses to stay contained within the intentions that summoned it. It spreads, dismantling carefully constructed facades and leaving behind a landscape shaped by consequence rather than control. Those who believed they were directing the outcome discover too late that they were merely participants in something far larger and far more unforgiving. Anger does not disappear when the truth comes out. It evolves. Guilt hardens into resentment, fear mutates into calculation, and survival becomes the only moral compass left standing. Every character is forced to confront the damage they were willing to justify, the lines they crossed while convincing themselves there was no other choice. Redemption, if it exists at all, is distant and uncertain, obscured by the wreckage of decisions made under pressure. What unfolds next is not closure, but reckoning. Trust will never return in its original form. Relationships will bear fractures that cannot be repaired, only managed. The future is shaped not by what was revealed, but by how each person chooses to live with it. And in a world where secrets once ruled, the greatest punishment is not exposure. It is the knowledge that nothing can ever be hidden again. This is where the story leaves us, standing at the edge of aftermath, where silence is heavier than any confession and survival demands a price no one wanted to pay. What comes next will not be gentle. It will be honest. And for those who believed they could control the truth, the final lesson is brutal and simple. Once unleashed, it answers to no one.